Welcome to the first episode of The Mirror and the Window, where we'll use film, music, and everything else to explore our own stories. The title of this first episode is The Inheritance and the Burden of Identity. Have you ever caught yourself living a life that doesn't quite feel like your own? Maybe it's a job you chose because it made someone else proud, the silence you carry because your truth felt too heavy to share, the version of yourself you perform in certain rooms just to feel safe or accepted. That's what I mean when I talk about the inheritance and the burden of identity. We are all born into stories written by families, cultures, communities, and systems. Some of these stories lift us, others box us in. And for many of us, the journey of life is about figuring out which part of those stories we want to carry forward and which one we're finally ready to set down. This isn't just philosophical, it's personal. It shows up in our choices, our relationships, in those quiet moments when we wonder, is this who I really am? Or who I was told to be? That's where a film comes in. Movies bypass the noise and go straight to the heart. They let us witness lives that mirror our own or open our eyes to new ways of seeing. They stir conversations we've avoided, emotions we've buried, and identities we've longed to reclaim. Today, I'm exploring 5 films that on the surface seem very different. They are Giant, Eternal Sunshine on the Spotless Mind, Moonlight, City of God, and Get Out. They span decades, continents, and genres, but they ask the same question: who gets to define who we are? Together, these films don't just entertain, they illuminate. They give us permission to question, to feel, to remember, and maybe even to choose something different for ourselves. Together, these films reveal how identity isn't fixed. It can be molded, stretched, and sometimes even liberated. Let's begin. Giant, 1956. Identity as inheritance. Giant is a Texas epic about land, legacy, race, and resistance. It was Dallas before Dallas. Identity here is passed down through name, land, and power. But it also shows how those legacies are questioned, even resisted over time. What happens when the next generation doesn't want that name you gave them? Jordan Benedict believes in tradition, but his children, through their relationships with Mexican American communities, begin to crack that foundation. Giant presents identity as something passed down with both pride and prejudice. The film interrogates the myth of American exceptionalism by examining how wealth, whiteness, and patriarchy are embedded in the generational identity. Jordan Benedict's pride in his land and his lineage is undercut by blind spots, particularly around race and class. His wife Leslie disrupts these inherited norms, suggesting that identity can evolve through empathy and conflict. The next generation becomes the fulcrum. Will they uphold outdated systems or forge new paths? The film challenged us to reflect on how we inherit social power and will we have the courage to break with it. The film Giant is a story of identity shaped by pride and challenged by empathy. Next up is Eternal Sunshine on the Spotless Mind, 2004. Here, we're escaping identity. It's a poetic sci-fi romance in which a man literally tries to erase memory to escape the pain of a broken identity, particularly the pain of lost love. But memory is an architecture of identity. Memory isn't just a record of our past, it's the raw material of who we are. Joel and Clementine's attempt to erase their heartbreak reveals that love, loss, and longing are deeply woven into their self-concepts. Trying to escape heartbreak, they risk erasing their humanity. The film reminds us that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's truth. And in trying to avoid pain, we risk dismantling the very foundation of our growth. The truth, identity, but not out of scars, but because of them. Here, identity is not just inherited, it's accumulated. Next film, Moonlight, 2016, Oscar winner for Best Picture. Here we're talking about the silence of identity. Moonlight is a story of becoming, of shaping yourself for safety, of bearing softness to survive. Chiron is little, then Chiron, then black. But in the quiet moments, we see his truest self never left. It just waited. Moonlight, told in 3 acts, follows a black boy growing up in Miami. He navigates his identity, masculinity, and queerness in a world that often denies his truth. Moonlight takes us deeper into the cost of a silent self. It's a masterpiece in showing how identity is not just about discovery, it's about survival. From childhood to adulthood, Chiron is trying to find a space in the world where it's safe to be black, poor, and queer. He shapeshifts, literally and emotionally. Each chapter of his life reveals a version of himself adapted for safety. Little, Chiron, and finally black. The film's quiet genius lies in its strength. It's what goes unsaid, explores identity can become an armor, how even the most hardened versions of us carry those longing to be seen. Moonlight doesn't just depict transformation, it reminds us of the cost of denial and the liberation found in truth. But in the quiet, aching moments, Moonlight reminds us that our truest self never leaves us. It waits, sometimes for years. City of God, 2002, Imposed Identity. Then this is a raw, fast-paced Brazilian drama that tells a story of youth growing up in the favelas of Rio. In the favelas, identity is written in violence. It's a devastating portrait of life where the identity is forged in brutality, fear, and loyalty. A world where you're born into becomes your name, your role, your fate. In the favelas, becoming someone often means becoming feared. The film captures how systemic inequality and institutional neglect narrow the paths available to young people, especially black and brown boys. But Rocket, our storyteller, chooses the camera over the gun. Reclaiming his voice, photography becomes both a survival tool and an act of reclamation. City of God forces us to ask, who gets to imagine a future? Who gets trapped in someone else's narrative? Is survival itself a form of resistance? Can telling your story reclaim your identity? Next, Get Out, 2017, where identity as performance. Get Out is a genre-defying social thriller where black identity is under siege by white liberalism. Beneath its horror is a sharp critique of performance, control, and racial gaslighting. Chris, the protagonist, is constantly forced to code switch, smile, nod, appease. Never truly honored, but admired, meant, fetishized, commodified, and trapped. He realizes that his very body has been desired and co-opted by those who claim to be allies. Jordan Peele uses horror to expose the theft of cultural identity. It is consumed, distorted, and weaponized, especially under the guise of allyship. The film turns racial microaggressions into macro horrors, showing how the theft of cultural identity is not just metaphorical, but a form of psychic and literal violence. The horror isn't the hypnosis, it's the pretending. Chris' survival becomes a reclamation. He reclaims voice, power, self. It's a gripping reminder that survival is not enough. So liberation is the goal. This is the dark underbelly of the inheritance of identity, when your identity isn't just misunderstood, but is used against you. So let's connect threads. Identity is never neutral. It is inherited, erased, commodified, sometimes reclaimed. Each character we met in these stories is navigating a world that tells them who they are, or worse, who they're allowed to be. But in each story, someone exists. They speak. They choose love. They remember, survive. They tell their story. As a coach and a consultant, I see this every day. People navigate the stories they're inherited, trying to find the truth underneath. Whether in the boardrooms in the day or on a beach shore at night, we're all asking, who am I, really? And who do I become? This series, The Mirror and the Window, isn't separate from my work. It's an extension of it. Art holds up a mirror to who we are and opens a window to who we might become. Thanks for taking the time and sharing this journey with me. Let's keep the conversation going. I would love to have a discussion about this topic. And if these thoughts resonate with you, if something came out of this that piques your interest or ignites your soul, please like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, this is The Mirror and the Window.